Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Hello again. It feels like it's been a while, and it hasn't, but it feels like it's been a while.
It really does. It really does. I'm totally with you.
So today our episode is about FIABCI, which is also known as the international.
It has a French name, but in essence, what it is, it's an organization that's been around for over 73 years. That is an international real estate organization that networks, creates an international global network of not only real estate practitioners that are brokers and agents and practice in that end, but anything related in the ecosystem of real estate internationally.
Right, so it's basically known as the International Real Estate Federation.
There you go.
But if you break down the letters, it doesn't match. So, but anyway, the International Real Estate Federation, and what I like about this whole concept is the fact that we're always talking about whether you're an investor or you're an agent or a brokerage is creating your team. And this is basically a federation, an international federation of every single team member you could possibly want in the real estate industry, whether it's an accountant or a mechanic. When we just had the recent Congress here, I met an international elevator installation company, which is great if you're doing new construction. So I love the fact that basically membership in this organization is your international team of real estate experts.
Yeah. I also love the fact that the president of this international federation this year is from the United States. He's from Manhattan, from New York. And so I love the fact that it was hosted here in the United States for the first time in over 25 years, and that it actually was hosted in Miami by the great work of the Miami Association of Realtors in partnership with this international federation. And so, it was, quite the experience, I think, to have this international Congress that happens every year all around the world. Last year was in Paris, and that not only it came to America for the first time in so many years. Where else in America would use this conference than in,
than in Miami.
Exactly.
Well, we've long been known as the gateway to the Americas, and now we're becoming known as the gateway to the world. So it makes sense that it would be held in Miami, especially since everybody right now is, has their eye on Miami for a variety of different reasons.
Absolutely.
With, the number of multinational companies we have here, our international airport ranks number 1 and 2 for cargo and passengers. Our ports are, I think, the top ports in the country for international cargo. So it makes sense that if you're going to host an international federation and you're hosting it in the U.S., that it's here in Miami.
Absolutely. We call it the global city of the future, for a reason. And there's a lot of the presentations conveyed very much that message.
Right. And you got to share the stage. You got to interview Jeb Bush. What an amazing honor, and what an amazing human.
Yeah, no, it was really an incredible experience. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would be interviewing a two-time governor of the state of Florida, son of a president of the United States, brother of a president of the United States, someone that has had, really a big influence in Miami, specifically in South Florida real estate, with his earlier work, and then, of course, all of the big transformative ideas that he implemented during his tenure as governor of the state of Florida. So, yeah, it was quite an incredible, experience. And I will say, to your point about, what an incredible human. In preparation for this, I was asked to do this 2 months ago, and so I read a lot. I listened to a lot of the work of Jeb Bush, and definitely there were a lot of things that pleasantly surprised me about his mindset and his approach, and I certainly learned a lot during the research, and then of course it was just an incredible experience to share that stage with him.
And he's the perfect example, I think, of a Miami resident, right? So he wasn't born here.
Right.
He wasn't raised here.
Yeah.
He's married to a Mexican woman. Mm-hmm. And when it was time for him to settle down with his family, he couldn't think of a better place than Miami because of its culturally diverse and multinational flair. He felt like everybody would fit in here. Yeah. And he has, adopted the city like heart and soul. And to your point, he's made a good impact on the community, an incredible impact on not only the local community, but the state. Yeah. And I think his family is indicative of the types of families that are in Miami. And, most of them foreign born. And
I think it's incredible. I think that this is all part of the American story and of the American dream and the diversity of those stories and of those dreams, right? And, what I find really interesting is, here you have a young man who goes over to León, Mexico to work. He, from Texas, and falls in love with a lovely woman and decides that this is the woman that he wants to marry and wants to build a family with. And the fact that they have 2 kids, the kids are raised in León, Mexico. Now it's time for them to, head back to the U.S. And in his mind, what he's thinking is, my kids are now fluent in English. My kids have only, learned to speak Spanish. And I want to find a place where I could bring him and that the transition would be smoother. Right? And so he says, I'll go to Miami because not only my wife's family is from there, but more importantly, it is a place that is open and welcoming to being bicultural and bilingual. And that this is where they're going to learn English. This is where they're going to, basically, learn to be American. And I thought that there was something really magical about that. That CEO of the Miami Association of Realtors, Teresa Kinkinney, we affectionately call her TK. She does those presentation on the stats of Miami, and we're the #1 foreign-born city in America. And I think that there's something powerful, and he alluded to that. There's something powerful about that, and that adds to the allure of Miami.
Right, and I know the majority of the people are from the Caribbean, Central and South America, but in the last decade, we've seen an increasing number of Europeans also moving over here and making Miami home, and that's why we have all of the great macaroon shops and French bakeries, and we have a lot of
better wine.
Well, no, I can't say better wine.
Really?
We've always had good wine. We've always had good wine. Come on, we have a lot of wines from Argentina, from California. So, but yes, it's definitely a growing international community, and it's so exciting. I've just seen it when I moved from California 30-something years ago. I remember the food options here were kind of limited. Right? Yeah. There was Cuban and there was American fast food, but there wasn't a lot of Chinese food, there wasn't a lot of Mediterranean food, and coming from San Francisco, which was such a culturally rich city food-wise, I was like, oh my gosh, we're lacking. And I can honestly say we're lacking no more, and we're actually one of the top foodie destinations now in the United States, and you can find just about any kind of food here now.
And I thought I think that the what was really poignant is last year having the Michelin stars starting to be handed out to our restaurants, and the Bib Gourmand, and a lot of great and many that were born and raised here, concepts that were created here first and were not necessarily transplanted, but it was created out of the flavor of the culture. That was an incredible moment, I think, for food and beverage industry in South Florida.
Agreed. So back to the World Congress that we had here. There were over 400 something countries represented. And I met a lot of people. There was a big contingent from Georgia, from the country of Georgia. There was a huge contingent from India. Who else did you meet?
We had there was over 432 delegates from 32 countries. Pretty much around the world was represented. This is such a diverse and international federation that, for example, next year's conference will be in Singapore, and they had 2 years ago it was Angora, and then they went to Paris, and this year in Miami. So I met people from Ukraine. I met people from definitely the group from Georgia was a large group. The Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Austria. There was a nice contingency from Austria. Had some great conversations. Brazil. Venezuela, we had really a contingency from all around the world. And what I found really impactful is the relationships that all of them have with each other. They've been around together for a long time, and they really have found ways to do business with each other. The thing that I enjoy the most about the way that they structure the conference is what happens in the last 2 days, in which they always have a social component because they want to get a little bit of the flavor of wherever they're at. But then they have, more importantly, an actual get down and dirty with a marketplace. They have a tour. They want to tour properties. They want to really understand the real estate market from a tangible, boots on the ground perspective. And I think that is incredibly valuable, because oftentimes, how many times have we gone to conferences and we never leave the hotel or leave the convention center? I think that is a lesson for a lot of conferences around the country and around the world, that it is important, especially in real estate, to have boots on the ground and to have that experience to go and visit different places. Large mass of groups got into buses and went around and visited different projects. And I thought that was, I think that's a lesson.
Well, and I think it's a lesson to attendees too, because most of the conferences that the Realtor Association puts on does have either before or after market tours, but most of us don't stay because we've already been there a week, so we don't take advantage of really getting in to know that market. And that is a shame. That's a loss, because we're there with all of the knowledge, but sometimes seeing things that are done in an area that are done differently, you get a better view of something that you could take back that might work well at home. And they did a Miami River tour. What was super interesting is the Indian group that I seemed to, for whatever reason, we ended up sitting at the same tables over and over again, so it was nice to get to know them over the couple of days, they're a fairly large investment group. And I thought, they were just coming here really to come for the Congress and to meet their peers and everything else, but they're actively investing and looking in Florida in general, but Miami in specific, and they own a lot of multifamily. And when I asked, I said, well, do you own any in Miami? And they said, not yet, but they own a lot in London, and they felt like this was the next big place that they wanted to be. And I'm like, really? Like from London to Miami? Talk about jumping over the pond. But so I thought that was very interesting, that they were actively looking for multifamily, and they've been around for a long time, and they felt like the timing was right to come here. So I think that's interesting, given what we're seeing in the national market and how, because of the interest rate hikes and everything, deal flow has slowed because capital has slowed down. But there is still a huge, huge demand from the international community looking at very specific markets. So,
well, I find it interesting that you mentioned London, because I remember this is even before the pandemic, when prices started to increase. There was a move of price appreciation. Many years past the mortgage crisis, people would say, well, when you're looking at these prices, how is it that people are still buying, right? Because oftentimes, from a local perspective, we're prisoners of our own historical, knowledge of where prices are. But I remember looking at a study that said that prices in Miami were 6 times less expensive than they were in London, for example. So when you saw, a lot of that investment coming from the UK, and we do have a lot of investment from UK in South Florida, it just makes all the sense in the world. That was an interesting dynamic. I'm sure they're going to find the multifamily here in Miami, a bargain compared to London.
Yeah, based on the rents my son's paying in London, I would agree.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting because FIABCI does have a link also with Miami, right?
Yeah.
That kind of goes back really far. So with Kenneth Keyes, and Kenneth Keyes was the founder of the Keyes Company, and he was president of the Miami Association in 1941. And he received the Medal of Honor from FIABCI in 1963. So talk about somebody who gave a huge amount to not only his local community, but the international real estate industry as well, to have been recognized and been a part of FIABCI pretty much since its founding.
Yeah. Things really just tickle me completely because they found this company in 1943. In 1963, they're involved internationally. They're bringing people to Miami, and I often think about those 20-year period where Miami was at that stage. It's almost like you're not ready for prime time, but it takes so many people that build it up in order to get to where we are. And when you see the response from the people that came at this, federation and at this Congress, so overwhelmingly positive. I mean, they were just so happy to be here, and they really saw a lot of value, not only in the location, but in the caliber and the quality of the presentation. So I thought that there was a lot of positives to be around, but kudos to all of those that came before us to build this ecosystem in which now we're seeing a thriving Miami and a growing Miami, and hopefully we also get to put a little bit of our imprint in that fabric of our city and the growth of our city for another 100 years.
And the interconnectivity is something that I love, right? I love the fact that the world is the global marketplace. So you're basically limited by, I don't know what you're limited by, your imagination, I guess, because you really can go anywhere. And I think of how far some of these people traveled. I kept trying to see, who traveled the farthest? And the fact that Miami is such an international airport, we have 144 direct flights with nonstops, which is one of the things that I love because I love to travel, but I hate the layovers and the waiting because it takes a long trip and makes it really, really long, unless it's a long trip to begin with, in which case I like stopping halfway because the thought of being on a plane for too long. But anyway, so I think that interconnectivity and the ease that it is to fly. We have the direct flights from Dubai now, and we're trying to get direct flights from, I think, China and Japan, and once we do, that market's going to open up significantly. So I think that's really exciting.
I also want to say that, I want to give kudos because there is, and we'll put the link, but there's a resource page of all the presentations and a lot of the videos. And so there was a lot of good information that was shared. So one of them is Anna Bozovic of Analytics Miami, presented on this idea of predicting the future, follow the money. But I love the way that she presents information by taking this macro view and then seeing macro forces and then looking micro and seeing how those forces are interacting with our local market. And, this idea of looking at COVID as a grand accelerator of trends. We already spoke about, but look at this idea. She says that the pandemic has accelerated us into the future that is built around the internet. I know we heard Gunnar Branson with Afire talk about how the office market is pretty much in bad shape all around the country, except in Miami. And he says that, for some reason, people don't want to go to work, 20-degree weather, right. But they still go to work here in Miami, and it's the environment that is created. So I thought that was a really interesting concept. Did you have any thoughts on that, on this idea of having a world or the future that is built around the internet?
Well, I think we've been there for a while now. Before COVID, we were already there. That's why everyone kept saying, oh, retail's dead, because everyone was shopping on the internet. But the reality is that the internet is just becoming more integrated in our life. It's not taking over, I don't believe. Right. And I think it's just shifted and facilitated how we do business and research and everything else. But in reality, I still believe in the boots on the ground, the physical. Like, you can do a lot of research on the internet, but there's nothing that beats the research of the physical going. Like, I can pretty much tour, to our point where we're talking about London, I can tour all of London with Google Earth and walking and virtual, goggles and everything else. But the experience of physically being there and walking the streets and the feeling, the emotional ties, the smells, the fact that you're engaging all of your senses, that's something that the internet and virtual reality is trying to get to. But for me, and maybe it's just my age and the decade that I was born, it's not there yet, right? Like, there's something about engaging all of the senses and meeting these people in person. You could have probably done a lot of these presentations virtually, right? But what would it have taken away from being in the room and seeing people's reactions and talking to the people at the table and getting their feedback and hearing kind of the bzz, the buzzing in the background when a point was made that people either agreed or disagreed with. So I do believe that the internet has accelerated life in general, but I still think every now and then we need to take a step back. And
I do find it interesting that there has been, especially I think when we go and see presentations about updates on commercial real estate, that I think that there's a faction of people that believe that somehow the effects of the pandemic were going to be limited to that timeline. And that as further away we get away from the pandemic, that somehow there's going to be some sort of return to normal, or return to the way things were in some aspects. And I think that there's another group that is basically clearly stating we will never be the same, right? And we have to adapt. And it doesn't mean that it is, that it is worse or better. It just means that it is different. And so, whether you are building office or dealing with, the realities of handling retail, you have to realize that it is a changed world. And I think that is very clear when you look at not only this conference, but other conferences, and how many sessions were about AI. Or about augmented reality, or about all those things. That seems to be the topic du jour, is the thing that we're most interesting about. And we had our chairwoman of the board, Inés Hegedes Garcia, make a presentation on AI and on the usability of AI. And she has this phrase, which I think is very important, about that AI is not going to replace the agent, right? But the agents that use AI are going to replace the agents that don't use AI. And so this component I thought was very interesting. And if there was one really interesting dynamic idea that I saw from Jeb Bush in our conversation, is this idea. And I thought, I want to share it here because I think it's such a smart thing to understand. And what he says is that the world is moving at such a warp speed, right? And the disruption that is created by the combination of automation, the explosion of AI, and the rapid advancement of technology has led to a disruptive political system. And so what he's saying is that when we find ourselves in the middle of a disruptive political system, we got to look at how the world has shifted and how difficult it is to really adapt to those changes. Sometimes you want to call time out and say, okay, can we slow down until we analyze the effects of this, technological advancement and AI and its, ethical concerns and all that other stuff. But the growth is exponential technology-wise. And we always have to realize that creates disruption, and that kind of disruption affects all aspects of society, including politically. So I thought that was a really smart thing versus just saying, well, you have two groups that are diametrically opposed to each other. I think it's more of, the environment in which we're in.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of thoughts on that. So the world's always been changing, right? Change is inevitable. It's just how we react to it. And I think the world was already changing before the pandemic. We already had the internet. We already had AI. AI has been around actually for quite some time. It just is becoming more and more mainstream. So I think change has always been around. What's interesting now is that because information is so readily available with the internet, and because AI, for better or worse, can be used for good or evil, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of, it's harder to find facts, I think, because you can search the internet and find something that states ABC. And then you can find another piece that says, no, this is not true, it's this. And so it's, even though it's easier to fact check, it's also harder to fact check. And I think what's harder to fact check is some of the social media and where we get our information from and what the source is. You know, we always say, go to the source. Don't go 4, 5, 6 down, because it's almost like the game of telephone when we were kids, where the first person says one thing, and by the time it got to the end of the circle, it was something totally different. Right. And I think that's part of what Jeb Bush was alluding to in terms of the disruptive political system and all of this change is what's true, what's not true, what's perception versus reality. And I think that that's the hard part that we're going through right now. But change has always happened rapidly. I mean, you think about the industrialization, you're a history buff. Just think about how fast all of that happened. And then the politics, the government and the policies had to go back and start regulating all of this change. But you don't stop innovation, right? You let the innovation happen. Because it's going to happen anyway, because innovators innovate and innovation is always disruptive.
Hence the term growing pains, right?
Exactly.
You're always going to go through that.
And then you have to go back. So now, you know, governments are going back and saying, whoa. Let's look at the internet. Let's look at social media. Let's look at AI. What needs to be regulated to try to keep it somewhat in check so that the bad opportunities aren't breeding and taking over all of the good qualities that this brings to the world in general. So.
And I think that this is one of the reasons why I have a hard time accepting that the role of the agent and the interpersonal relationships are ever going to go away, that is somehow going to lessen in value. I think if anything is going to increase in value because number one, I think with all of the data that we have, what we miss is perspective. What we miss is in the analysis. That's really where the sweet spot is. And that's why when we speak to agents, we always say there's nothing more powerful than being a hyperlocal agent because it requires a human mind to look at an area and to really break down that data and then hence provide the maximum value to our clients. And I remember when we were going through the pandemic, there were people that were saying, well, we're never going to shake hands. We're never going to hug. We're never going to kiss each other. We're never going to, do that in public. That is so true. But, we definitely are warm, people. We like hugs. But I think it's a human need. And I've thought about this so much lately when I speak to my clients that when you get involved in all this tech and you get all these phone calls and you're getting people that are trying to fish for your information and steal your identity and you're dealing all that stuff, I think at some point you want the quality of that human contact to be able to look somebody in the eye and to see exactly that they are for real and that this is a person that you want to do business with. And I think that's an important lesson in all of this, that when you bring it down to its basic endeavor, and we always say you want to do business with people you know and trust, and that part of that building of the trust is in that face-to-face, is in that interaction, is in that human connection.
Well, think of all of the changes we've had in the real estate industry where they're like, oh, this is the death knell for realtors. They're going to, and one was the internet, right? Yeah. Then it was the online search portals that anyone could search. And then it was the MLS. And then it would there's always something that's going to, just like it's going to kill retail, it's going to kill the realtor. But to your point, there is still that human need for interaction and for experience. And to your point about the real estate agents' insights, that's important. That's something you don't get on the internet, right? You can get a bunch of different opinions. You can get different processes for how you go about buying or selling. You can get all of that, but in terms of the hyper local, you can get individual data, but you can't really get the connectivity of that data without
Correct.
an expert who lives and works in that area.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
especially if you haven't visited there and you're going into a new market.
And interestingly, because you spoke about the Kai's company, I once heard Mike Papas speak about, when the iBuyer programs were coming out and, there was a lot of concern. I remember him breaking down everything he had seen during his 30 plus year career. And he goes like, when this came out, everybody said this was going to be the end. And then this came out and everybody says it was going to be the end. And there is something about steady consistency wins the race, right?
Yeah.
Stick to your values, right? Stick to what is important to you. Stick to always providing value first, and you will have longevity. And if you have that long-term view and you provide those things, and you have the right values, then that provides for a long, long career. And
right. And at the end of the day, the agent and the relationship that the agents have with not only their customers, but with their community is what I think ensures the longevity of the agent in a transaction. Just to that point, look at all the work that we do as the Miami Realtors for our community. Look at all of the grants we've given. We've participated in a portion of the underline. We've created boat ramps. We've created dog parks. We've created universally accessible playgrounds so that everybody can enjoy being outside and in a playground. And that sense of creating community and that human need to do better and improve, I think is kind of at the heart of maybe what Mike was getting at, that we're embedded not just in a transaction, we're embedded in the community.
Yeah, and I find it interesting because we also had the presentation by Craig Studnicki of, when he does his Miami report, which is always wonderful. And he speaks about there's 134 companies that have Fortune 500 and plus companies that have moved to Miami. I mean, not all of them are Fortune 500 companies, but, we have 134 major companies that have moved to Miami. And you start to think about all of those employees that are coming in to add to the fabric of our culture, and the fact that for the first time, Florida surpassed New York in as far as the number of jobs, which is, an incredible thing. And we definitely are at a crossroad where we're going to have to deal with a lot of those growing pains and to deal with them effectively. And I'm happy that I think I can say this confidently that the realtor industry and profession is going to be a big part of those changes and of that adoption. And I think that that's something where beyond our work to help someone, acquire an investment property or relocate or work more efficiently, et cetera, we have an opportunity to add to the fabric of our community. And I think that's fantastic.
Agreed. So do you have a fun
So,
fact or a fun stat?
I was thinking about this because I'm always impressed by the fact that we had people from 32 separate countries and they all spoke English, right? Yeah. And so how powerful it is to, that English is such an important language, and I've often heard that number was changing, but I don't think it has. So I saw this. This comes from Elliot Eisenberg, the bow tie economist. Yeah. And, we love his little thing. So he goes, by scanning publicly available websites, the most popular language on the internet is English, with 55.6% of domains using it. Russian is second most popular language at 5%. Then Spanish at 4.9%, German at 4.3%, French at 4.2%, Japanese at 3.6%, Turkish at 2.4%, then Portuguese at 2.3%, and Italian at 1.9%. And then, of course, the Chinese language websites are about 1.4% of the domain. I thought that was really interesting because I know from history that language is a very big component of the permanence and the predominance of culture. And I think that it is really incredible how exportable the language of English is, and how, again, everyone that we met was proficient in it, and they carried business in English. So
well, it is the language of business, right?
Yeah, that's so true.
So this whole episode has pretty much been about international and international networks. And we're such an international city that I thought I'd quote some of the stats from the Beacon Council. So according to the Beacon Council, Miami is the second largest banking center in the U.S. And we have the second highest number of consulates and trade center offices. So number two, but we are number one. Miami was ranked among the top world cities by the Globalization and World Cities Research Network for connectivity through 4 advanced producer services, which are business indicators for international business. And it was accounting, advertising, banking, finance, and law. So I thought that was interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. We're one of the top cities for those 4 international services.
Yeah. That's incredible. I think we're only behind, New York City as comes to banking and finance, as industries, which is incredible. And I think that, if I may add, I think what adds to it, and this idea of us connecting to the rest of the world, is that 54% of our workforce is foreign born, and our workforce speaks over 100. They come from over 100 countries, and 75% of our residents speak a language other than English at home. So, that again just adds to that component.
And we have over 1,000 multinationals in Miami alone. I mean,
Wow.
that's pretty big.
Yeah.
In Miami.
Well, welcome one and welcome all. We're ready for you.
Come to Miami.
Exactly.
You'll feel right at home.
Yeah, for sure.
Till next time.
Till next time. Thank you guys for joining us.